Okay, so I'm going to introduce our first speaker, our fearless leader, James Abel, who has been the director of Bay Area Python Association for like 1 year and going on 2 years. And, technical leader, engineer at Intel, engineer at Clarion. And so he's going to talk to you a little bit about spreadsheets and Python.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Phoebe. Hey, Dorothy, I don't know if it's possible to turn this up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and speak pretty loudly in the mic, but if there's a little bit of a volume increase, that would be good. Maybe I'll be okay for now, but maybe the other speakers might want it a little bit higher. Yeah, well, thanks, Phoebe. And yeah, so let me give a little introduction. So actually, Lisa and I were having a chat on Slack about spreadsheets, and it's like, does anybody ever have a problem importing like CSVs or spreadsheets? Does it all just magically work and there's never any issues? And I'm like, okay, in my life, day to day, I get a lot of spreadsheets, and I've had some issues with that. And so I'm like, well, okay. Let's talk. Maybe this is actually going to be a good little talk to have in front of the audience here at SF Python. And so, what's my life like? Well, it's usually kind of like this: is that I have a project, and I need data. Somebody says, "Hey, I've got a bunch of data that I need to give you." I say, "Great, give me access to your database." And then what do I get back? Of course, see the attached CSV file. Party on, have fun. And exactly what's in there. I get to figure it out. What are the data types? And by the way, all these slides will. I do have a GitHub repo that's public that all this is on. So if you want to take a look at this later, and I got some code examples. So anyway, so this is kind of, I get this in my current job a lot. I've gotten over the course of a very long history. I'd like to get a little question to you folks. I mean, so I'm going to say spreadsheets. I'm going to talk about CSV, comma, separated values, and spreadsheets for a moment. I'm going to kind of keep them together. So how many people use spreadsheets? You have a pretty good relationship with them. Okay, good. I'm talking to the right crowd. How many people have a problem with spreadsheets and dealing with the data and importing them and stuff? Okay, well, I was a little bit of a presumptuous here, but at least in my my life and what I was talking to Lisa, it's kind of like, yeah, so it's kind of a love-hate relationship. You get them, you get the data, but actually using them can be a challenge sometimes. And so, like, why do we have this thing? What's up with it, with all this like angst, right? At least some people have. Well, a little history. So CSV files basically first appeared like in the 70s. And then I don't know if everybody was around programming in 1979 like me, but the first spreadsheet that I encountered is called VisiCalc. There's this thing called Apple II, made by this guy named Woz, great guy. And it looked like that, right? It wasn't very, like, I don't know. It was really cool at the time, but now it looks a little simple maybe, or a little basic. And then eventually, the company called Microsoft that was making software for Apple computers came out with Excel on the Macintosh in 1985. And eventually they did it on this other operating system called Windows afterwards. And then now we have Python support. I'm not going to go into it, but we have some Python support in Excel now, which has happened. And then there is an RFC on CSV, so it kind of got a little official in 2005. So it's been a while. And is it all figured out yet? Not really. So what I'm going to do is kind of give you a few horror stories. This is somewhat entertaining, I guess. Oh, I'm not going to get the horror stories yet. I'm just going to talk a little bit about Python and the spreadsheet CSV. So you probably all know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Python has a built-in CSV module, which is awesome. It's great that its battery is included, and I use it all the time. There's some other things that we'll read in Excel files. So one thing that I use a lot is OpenPyXL. Then I also use pandas, but I recently learned that when I use pandas, I'm actually using OpenPyXL as the default. They have different engines, but that's the default. And then I have also in the past used this XLRD, Excel Read, I guess is what it is, XLRD. So there's a few different ones out there, and they're on PyPI and they're awesome, and you can use them. And I've used them. And so what's my experience been? And these are a little bit of tales from the field. So here's an example of something that went my way. Someone gave me, as they do, they gave me a spreadsheet. And well, there's some calculations. Oh, this is okay. There's one thing that didn't get rendered here, but this is it's 2 divided by 0 is the divide by 0 here, right? Which makes sense. The spreadsheet is telling us that there's a divide by 0, and I'm glad that it's telling us that. But if I take this code and this loads in, you can I won't go through it in detail, but basically it loads in the values in the spreadsheet, and it's saying, okay, in the A1 here, it's a load of 2.0, and then this is a 0, so it's going this way. Then this is a 0, and this one is, of course, 7. Why is it 7? It's actually it's saying it's an integer. Well, it took me a while to figure that out, but guess how many characters are in pound div/0? 7. So somehow that happened. Now, now to be fair, PyOpenExcel tells me that it's a divide by 0, and so I would do the right thing. But I actually had a calculation that was giving me this when I had to divide by 0, and it was giving me 7, and I had to figure out what was going on. That was fun. So that's fine. So, but I said, well, I'll use PyOpenExcel a little bit more, and so I got another spreadsheet from somebody, and they had different values, and I've just taken out a couple of the fields, and they gave me this, and we say, okay, 0 is false, and 1 for true. And they gave me this. And then I evaluated it. And the first one is false, and the first one is true. False and true. How did that happen? Because they mistyped in an O. They had an O. An O is an O, right? No, this is an O, and this is an O. This is a 0, and this is an O. And guess what happens when you do a bool of a string? It's true. That was fun too. And they still, they're like, it's oh, I gave you an O. You asked for an O, gave you an O. But down here, I kind of talk about it, right? A2 is a number, A3 is a string. And I actually I got kind of tired of this. I wrote a little package. It's totally tiny little package, but it's called tobool that deals with these things. And so it's up on PyPI. It's not very impressive, but at least it works. And it kind of takes all of the things that you can say are supposed to be sort of true, like the string true and the string false, and yes and no and T and F and all that stuff. So these days I don't really just take it out of the, deal with the truthiness, right? Because the truthiness in Python can be a little interesting. False is usually pretty good, but true is it really true? Did you really mean it? Because if you do a bool on false, it's true. Right? So I wrote this thing, so that if you give tobool a false, it actually says it's false. Okay. And this isn't just a CSV or spreadsheet issue. It's just the way Python works, and there's truthiness. Here's another example. I actually found this today when I was adding to the slides. So I thought, I just talked about pandas, and pandas is an example. So I coded up I kind of copied my spreadsheet over, and I had another example. So I'm just going to import in pandas, and I'm going to show everybody how seamless it is to use pandas. So if you notice here, I've got, this is all the code, by the way. You import pandas PD, you read the Excel and print it. And of course, we've got a 2. We have a 2. And we have a 1 and a 1. And inside the spreadsheet, what's it's doing? It's A1 divided by B1. 2 divided by 1 is, of course, 2.1. The reason is because I didn't tell it that I didn't have any headers. And it decided that this is a fine number to print out as a result of this. So it was, my fault. I didn't tell it I didn't have any headers. You should have headers, but that's what happened. And then also, of course, you have NANDs. If you don't know what that's not a number. And so when you have not a number, sometimes math can get a little interesting. I wouldn't recommend doing a lot of math on NANDs. I would suggest that you convert it or treat it, do some sort of treatment to it before you just start doing calculations. Although sometimes you can actually do calculations on NANDs. There's even hardware that will treat NANDs and do various things without faulting in some cases, but I won't get into that. So anyway, so those are some examples of, tales from the field. We want to avoid, anybody know what this is? The gorge of eternal peril? Anybody? Okay, one, two, a few of them. You know where Python got its name? And not the snake, it's from Monty Python. And this is from, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. And so this is where I just decided to use something interesting. So this is the gorge of eternal peril. If you've never watched Monty Python stuff, you really should, because Guido did. I think that's just enough of a recommendation. And that's, Guido was like listening to or reading about Monty Python, which is where the name came from. And the killer rabbit, I'll let you look at the killer rabbit. It can get gruesome. But basically, it's just a harmless spreadsheet, isn't it? So in summary, my recommendation, I'm a little strong here, but my recommendation is to always check your data formats, always check your types. I didn't really get into it. If I would have more time, I would have gotten into pedantic, but that probably is a whole talk on its own. But there's a module, a library called Pydantic, which checks a lot of data types for you, and it's an awesome way of doing that. But always sanity check your answers, check calculations that are done inside of spreadsheets, because you might not get what you expected. And always check for irregular values, such as not a numbers and not availables and all of those things.